Welcome back, sailors. This is your captain speaking. This is another episode of the Bruise News. We got some cool news today, some stuff we're going to go over, and then there's there is something I'm going to lose my mind about. But first, we're going to start off with something cool. Darren Till, lots of stuff about. I'll just say this now. There's lots of stuff about weight cutting on this episode of the Bruise News. Lots of stuff. Weight cutting, division switching. There's lots of that stuff. So we're going to get into that right now. So Darren Till is making a move up to middleweight finally. It's something that a lot of people thought he should have been doing in the first place. It's clear that he was a really big welterweight, and I think that attributed to him being able to be knocked out so easily. I think one of the problems with a lot of that stuff is that the weight cutting actually takes a heavy toll on your body, and it's something that we haven't realized until recently that it's having those effects on the fighters, but it's kind of always been in our faces, and it's something that I've personally said for a long time, but I'm going to get into that after. Moving on with that, Conor McGregor, after all the bullshit that happened and all that, stupid drama and all those talks and all that stuff, he released a statement saying he has some fighters in mind that he'd like for a fight. He actually had 7 fighters. I think this is pretty cool because I would like to see Conor kind of get back to fighting instead of just the drama, but I'm not sure he's coming back mentally in the best place. It's something that I would like to see. It's something that I would like, I said that before, I want to see Conor at his best, and I just don't think that mentally he's at his best right now, and I want good things for him. I wanted good things for John Jones when it happened. Speaking of which, I heard that today or yesterday, Daniel Cormier had lost his father, so rest in peace to him. It's real sad, and I'm sure DC is not doing so well after losing his fight not that long ago and dealing with that stuff. Actually, John Jones sent out a tweet saying, all beef aside, respect to your father. He was a great man, and so are you, DC. And I was like, that's awesome that he said that stuff. But sometimes Jones can come off a little disingenuous. I really hope that's not the case. But bullshit aside, you don't want to see that with anybody. I don't care how much I hate a person. I don't care how much someone has done me wrong. I never want to see people hurting like that, but that's just me personally. Anyways, going back to what Conor was saying, Conor had some names in mind, and I do want to see him get back into the octagon, and I want to see him better himself. Some of the names he had were a lot of rematches. He wanted a rematch with Holloway, with Poirier, with Khabib, which I don't think he deserves right at this moment. He wanted a rematch with who else did I have on there? Holloway. We had Holloway, Khabib. Yeah, Poirier was one of those guys he had on his mind, and then he wanted Frankie Edgar, Justin Gaethje, or the Diaz rematch. That was the last one. That's a lot of names in mind, and I really wouldn't mind seeing any of those fights if I can be honest, except for the Khabib fight. I really don't want to see him face Khabib or Edgar, which kind of leads me into my next thing. So Frankie Edgar, along with Jose Aldo, both were planning a move down to bantamweight. I don't think Aldo should be moving down this far into his career. He's at the end stretch of his career. A lot of people don't know that, but Aldo's actually been a pro fighter since he was about 16 years old. He didn't have legit pro matches, but he was fighting against pros at that age, and he was in a lot of grappling tournaments in Curitiba and Sao Paulo and all those places. I don't know if anybody's ever watched his movie, but the dude had it rough, and he was really made in the streets, which made him that savage we really see in the octagon. You don't realize how emotional he actually is until you watch him fight, and he's such an emotionally fueled fighter, which is why it was so devastating to me personally when Conor had done what he did to Aldo so fast. Anyways, there's lots of those matchups I would like to see. Mainly, I would like to see the Poirier or Holloway rematch. I wouldn't mind seeing Gaethje, but I think that Conor would run through Gaethje personally. The Edgar matchup isn't really that interesting to me, but Edgar said that he would hold off on his cut to bantamweight to fight McGregor at lightweight. I think that in some ways Frankie's a good match for Edgar or Frankie's a good match for Edgar. Uh, Frankie Edgar is a good match for Conor McGregor because he has good wrestling. He's fast and he moves very well side to side, and Conor has a very straight attack. Conor has a very straight attack, with his left hand coming straight down the pipe, his kicks coming right to the body. So with Frankie's side to side, Conor would have to implement the leg kicks and a lot of those switch kicks that he doesn't really throw. He does throw a lot of cool capoeira kicks and stuff like that, but I don't think it would be that effective against Frankie. But Conor's really, really good at cutting off the octagon and using his hands. He doesn't have to use his feet if he doesn't want to. He's really good at kicking, but his punching is really where he stands out. I think that Conor is the best pure puncher in the UFC, possibly even in UFC history. So I think that plays off of him well, but Frankie is also extremely fast. And you could see Frankie really have that ability to land well because he switches stances and he throws the jab really nice and he's in and out very nice. So it really depends on the game plan going into those. That's, to me, is the most interesting fight actually between all of them. It's not the one I would necessarily want to see the most, but it's definitely the most interesting because it kind of would Frankie was really surprising even in the Holloway fight. So there's a lot of cool fights that I would love to see, like the Holloway rematch, Poirier, Diaz rematch. I would love to see all of those, but we'll see how it goes. I do personally think though that it's going to end up being Conor McGregor versus Justin Gaethje. I think that makes the most sense for Gaethje to push that fight. Conor doesn't really want to fight. Oh, I forgot that he also wants to fight Masvidal, but that's besides the point. Masvidal is way too big. I think Masvidal even might be too big for Nate Diaz personally, but that's another thing entirely. So anyways, after saying all that stuff, we're going to talk a little bit about something that pisses me off, and that's the weight cutting. Weight cutting in the UFC has become so crazy that it's unreal how it's affected these fighters. Like, we've seen fighters have absolutely devastated their bodies and their chins just to cut weight to have that size advantage. Like, we've even seen it. Like, I don't know if you can turn back and look at how Conor looked at 145. He went from being because Conor walks around about 169 to 170 pounds already, so he's a natural welterweight. That is a natural weight class. That is, when people say natural and they're talking about Conor being a 155er, that's not natural. Natural isn't cutting 15 pounds in, a month. That's not natural. That's unnatural. No, Conor's natural weight class is welterweight, and I do think that fighters need to be there needs to be a boundary. I think that there should be a 5-pound weight difference in each division. So it's Conor is a 170-pound fighter. I think that he should be restricted to losing 5 pounds or gaining 5 pounds, and then there should be more divisions in the UFC with more champions, people being multiple champions. It just it just makes more excitement and more depth in the divisions, and it gives other people the opportunity to be champions, not these guys like Conor who can really walk in and be like, hey, I want a shot against Khabib, and since he makes so much money and he has so much pull, that's going to be one of the best options for them, because that's really what happens when there's only 7-8 weight classes or divisions, and there's champions on those. We see these champions fight every 4 or 5 months, and then there's one guy who's really, it's not about being the best fighter at that point. It's almost a popularity contest until fighters really prove that there's a reason why they're in that position. It usually boils down to a popularity contest. I can think of at least a dozen times in the past 4 years easily that people have talked their way into championship opportunities or been so popular that they gain championship opportunities when they really didn't deserve it, and then vice versa on that, guys who really deserve it not getting those shots. Getting back to the thing that pisses me off is that we've seen in the past that weight cutting has that negative effect on people's bodies, and it hurts them, it hurts their careers, it hurts their chins. There's just so much surrounding it and so much bullshit behind it that I don't know why. Like, as a company that's really trying to look out for their fighters, I don't know if anybody else knew this either, but the UFC paired up with the NSAC and all that stuff, they really have the best medical background for athletes in the world. They literally have the best support system for their fighters in the world. And I don't know why they have such a terrible issue with this happening, because it's really, cutting that weight does so much more damage to your body than you realize. And then we see the effects of that. We see guys who have strong chins and they're great fighters getting absolutely knocked unconscious because their chins aren't there, because their blood pressure isn't right, their body isn't right, they haven't retained enough oxygen, they don't have enough water in their body, all from cutting massive amounts of weight. Up to extremes like back when Brock Lesnar was fighting. Brock Lesnar used to wrestle professionally before this, okay? So we're talking before the UFC, he was in the WWE. And then before the WWE, he was a college elite wrestler. And there's weight divisions in that too. And Brock was used to cutting weight back then. So when Brock got into the UFC, he could cut 35 pounds at heavyweight to make 265. Absolutely no problem. The guy was walking around at 300 pounds. Sometimes he would drop down to 280, and he'd be walking around at 280. And that, dropping that much weight at a heavyweight is insane. That's such a huge advantage to have that much weight on fight day, because that's the way that it goes. These guys think that they get an advantage from cutting down, let's say, from heavyweight. So you got Brock Lesnar, he's 285 pounds, we'll say, and he cuts down to 265. Well, then you have another guy who's at 240 pounds and he's not gaining any and he's not losing any. So you're like, oh, that's definitely an advantage for him. But really, because of the way that the UFC used to be before this, they had IV bags. And when they had IV bags, these guys could cut weight like Brock Lesnar could do, where he could do 25, 35 pounds, and he would cut the weight. And he'd cut the weight in, say, a day or two. Okay? Sometimes it would take a week. Sometimes, because of the dietitians, they would work on it for a month. But most of the time, the general time frame for these people losing that type of weight, especially the wrestlers who were used to doing this, they were cutting 35, 25, anywhere in that region of pounds in a couple of days. So then the weigh-ins happen. They're still cutting weight. They're making sure that their weight's, good. They're not drinking any water. They're not eating any food, and they're just absolutely drained. Absolutely drained. As soon as they step on that scale, they step off and they get off the stage, they immediately are popped in with an IV bag and they're pumped full of water. And this water is going right into their body and they're plumping up like a balloon right back to normal. Perfect appetite, perfect body, perfect amount of water in their system, all of that stuff. But the UFC cut that entirely. The IV bag was making it so guys were cutting such huge amounts of weight that a few people ended up getting sick occasionally, and then unfortunately a person had died from it. So I think all in all, weight cutting is just a horrible thing for the sport. I think that they need to work on people not having such gigantic weight cuts, because yeah, it is an advantage. When I used to watch Conor fight at featherweight, I thought it was disgusting, because the guy's cutting 30 pounds to fight down at welterweight, or to fight down at lightweight, featherweight, and he's losing all this weight. He goes in looking like Skeletor, and by the time fight day happens, he's back to his 170 and everything's all fine and dandy, and it's super dangerous. It's super bad for you, and they need to figure out a way that everything, works out better for everyone. I know some people are probably going to have, some disagreements with that, but I think that what it boils down to is what's best for the fighters and the best for our enjoyment. And when you really look at how this can be broken down into what the best product would be, I would want people to be at their healthiest. You want fighters to be at the closest to 100% that they're going to be, because then you get the best product and then you get the best fights. And I think that's the way that it should be. Anyways, I want to thank everybody for watching the video. If everybody can like it, everybody can share it, and maybe we can get some subscribers. I appreciate everyone who watched this video, and I hope that you have a good one. Take it easy.